You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick with CBT News. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today we've got Kevin Tynan, who is the Director of Research at Presidio Group. You know that name. And so Kevin, thank you so much for joining us on the show and welcome to the retail side of the industry.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure, Jim. Great to see you.
For sure. Presidio does a great job, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. Man, there's a lot that's happened since we spoke to you last. We are now headed for a different administration in the White House, and Trump is taken back over again, and there's a lot to talk about on that. So how do you foresee the results impacting regulations? And I know we've spoken a lot about EVs and that industry. So what impact do you think another Trump administration will have?
It sounds like the rhetoric is around smaller government, less regulation, which certainly helps. And I think, and if not helps, what it does, it may release some financial pressure on automakers to do things that they're either not good at or not profitable at, specifically electrification, and sort of pushing that through and forcing that on automakers who cannot be profitable doing it was detrimental. And I would say that you have the potential now for a little bit of a pullback on that, a little bit more of an organic industry again, where it's a little bit where the ball is in your court, where, hey, if you want to do big, heavy pickup trucks and SUVs, you can do that. If the market shifts, all your eggs are in one basket, but that's on you, right? We're not forcing you out of those products where you make money, but understand, that there's a lot of different nuance to demand that will let happen as we go into 2025 and beyond. But in terms of a flat out picking winners and winners and losers in terms of technology or of import export and trade issues, I don't think we're going to see any of that, if ever, but certainly not immediately, right? I think the changes will be nuanced, and I think relative to some of the structural issues over capacity globally in the auto industry, a change in the demand profile because a change in product portfolios has happened to where most automakers, not just in the US, but globally, have moved up market, more expensive products, which means less volume, which means if you are calibrated to an industry of high volume, low price, you have the wrong structure right now. And I think where 2025 is a year where we start, and we already have started to hear some of those changes. BMW, Volkswagen, Nissan just the other day talking about having to reduce some of those structural costs.
Yeah, for sure. What policies do you think could stimulate growth?
That's a tough one, and I'm not sure there is one that is just a flat out winner from start to finish. And I think part of the problem, Jim, is, and we've talked about it a lot, right? We're truck mix up over 80% in the US. Yeah. And for Stellantis, for General Motors, for Ford, they're well up into the 90% range. So there's not a whole lot left to do. And really that for the past 10 years has been the earnings and profit driver, even the volume driver. Hasn't been EV, it hasn't been more volume. It's been that mix shift. And for the automakers or the industry that's at the end of that runway, it's going to be very difficult to find the next catalyst or the next jumping off point. I think a lot of people thought it would be electrification, and that hasn't really played out in terms of demand, in terms of profitability. So that's why I say that this is a little bit of a difficult scenario in 2025 where there's too much capacity, and I don't think a swipe of the pen fixes it for anybody. I think the problems are more structural and bigger than that.
Really? Okay. And then, of course, he was elected on a number of different issues. One of them where he said, I'm putting 100% tariffs on these cars and car parts that come from other countries. It had a lot of automotive professionals, both on the OEM side as well as the dealer side, kind of nervous, shaking a little bit over what is this going to mean to the industry. A lot of people said, well, no, that's just, he doesn't understand. You're just putting a tax on the consumer. But nevertheless, he's the president, and this is the direction that he wants to go in. What kind what kind of ripple effect would something like that have?
Yeah, certainly it would create inflation. Uh, but I think, and some of the things that I've heard said, and obviously this still remains to be seen, is about wanting to trade, but doing it fairly and balanced. And I think if that's the issue, there's still some wiggle room in there to say like, hey, I go back to the capacity issue here, and I think what most countries, and not just ours, are trying to do and say is that, hey, if you have a capacity problem, which China probably does in electrification, right? They've grown so quickly that you overshoot capacity versus demand. Well, how do you do that? You either take out capacity or you find markets to put your products into.
That's right.
And it might be Europe, or it might be turning to the United States to say like, hey, we have a lot of extra stuff, we're going to send it to you. And I think this is a little bit of a line in the sand that says like, hey, you're not, and I hate to use the word dumping, but you're not dumping your products here because you have a capacity issue. Right. So there's a place for import, export, and trade, and I think that's what the administration is probably trying to work to, some fairness there, and just say, hey, like, you need to get your house in order. Rather than just turning to external markets and saying, take our excess stuff because we miscalculated.
Yeah. I had Michael Dunn on not too long ago. I don't know if you know that name, but he's one of the thought leaders in the country on the China auto market as it relates to the U.S. market. He ran GM and I think it's GM and Ford over there in China. But the guy has just dedicated his life and his research and what have you to what's happening with the China auto market and manufacturers over there. He feels as though we're asleep at the switch here in the U.S. because these China vehicles are coming. He said they've got vehicles over there that are $18,000, $19,000, nice EVs that you could put 100% tax on and still own the market in the U.S.
Yeah, and that's an interesting, and I still am trying to work out this dynamic in my mind, which is, look, Jim, every automaker has run away from the bottom of the market. It's not that for any other reason that they can't be profitable there. So could you sell $15,000, $20,000 vehicles? Probably all day long, but you're going to lose a ton of money on it. And that is a conscious business decision to say, we don't want to do that. We don't want to invite people to our portfolio unprofitably at $20,000 and try and move them up to our profitable price points, which could be $50,000.
Right.
You're talking 5 or 6 purchases between introduction to the brand and profitability for that brand. And every automaker has said, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So you can have that bottom end of the market, $15,000, $20,000. You know you're not going to be profitable, and I don't care. Nobody's going to be profitable there. You may have an ulterior motive for still wanting to sell there, which could be that, right? Well, Chinese manufacturers coming into the US at the very, very bottom of the market really isn't a threat to anybody, maybe the used car market. It's until they start to move up. In fact, I think those vehicles would fill a need for affordable, reliable product in the US because nobody else is doing it.
Right.
It would be so it'd be interesting to see tariffs on something above a specific price point and say like, hey, please take the $15,000, $20,000 part of the market, but stay out of the $40,000 part of the market. Otherwise, we're going to hit you hard with tariffs. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think there's a lot more nuance there than simply keep them out, let them in, because there is a need for the consumer to have affordable product.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, though, that the Trump administration, it will be a good thing overall for retail automotive moving forward and into 2025?
Yeah, from the perspective of less intervention or smaller government, I think, I'm a big believer in the invisible hand of the market, right? In that let those manufacturers do what they do, for better or for worse, right decision, wrong decision, and let it be organic and let it play out that way. Let certain players fill a niche. You want to be unprofitable at the bottom of the market because you have other motivations, then that's absolutely fine. If you don't want to be there, don't be there. And I think it's when the government, who isn't as good at making automobiles, certainly, or even analyzing the industry, that decides what those manufacturers who've been doing it for 100+ years should be doing. And so I think that's where you run into some of the problem. If it's an administration that sort of backs off that and says, you do what you do, and we'll make sure that the environment is fair and equitable and safe,
Right.
then I think it is a good thing for the industry. It's a good thing for every industry.
Yeah, yeah. Did you find it interesting that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are best buds now? I mean,
Amazing.
the owner of the largest EV company out there, and these guys are buddies.
What's interesting to me about that is when you think about, at least previously or historically, what Tesla's customer base was,
Yeah,
to what it should be now that he's aligned with President Trump, is, to me, a completely different customer.
totally different customer.
Right, and it's
Yep.
right, and
Yeah.
it would seem to me that the people who were buying Teslas are the people who dislike President Trump, now
Right.
President Trump. And the people who are supportive of Trump would never buy a Tesla.
That's
It's
right.
it's a very strange dynamic. But look, and if at the end of the day, it's about a lot more than just selling automobiles
Yeah.
to Tesla. It's about the AI. It's about the robotaxis. It's
Yeah.
about all these other things. And I think he honestly believes that's where the value in his company is.
Sure. A friend of mine is selling his Tesla because he doesn't want to be perceived as a Trump supporter.
Funny, I when I'm out and about and just having fun in my neighborhood, and I see some of, I might be walking the dog, and I see some of my neighbors drive by with their Teslas, and I go Trump, and they get all mad at me.
Boy, that'll throw him into a tizzy.
I said, "What? That's your guy, right?
That's right.
Musk, and that's your guy." And they go, "Stop it."
You think we'll end up okay in retail automotive for 2024? And now that we're winding down the last 6 weeks of the year,
it's good. Yeah, it's going to be relatively flat, I think, year over year, which again is concerning because we're now struggling with this 16 million unit mark, right? We were at 17 million plus for years and years, and now we're struggling with the 16. And if that's the ceiling, I think part of the problem is we have North America capacity for 22 million.
Wow.
Right. And that's where I come back to the idea that something has to give structurally, is that, and it's 22 million in North America. And if you think about Mexico and Canada sales, it's 3 million. So you're talking about, we're selling 16, but we're building around 19 for this market. And that doesn't count what goes exported and what comes in from other countries. So we're out of balance, I guess, is the point. So and I still go back to the idea that mix shift to 80% truck makes the market more expensive. And every other automaker has moved away from the bottom of the market, made more product. I can make more money selling fewer vehicles at higher prices. Well, you're never getting volume back by raising prices constantly,
That's
right? That's just how business works, right?
That's
The higher the price, the less the volume. So I'm not sure that volume ever comes back. So I think what you get is a reasonably healthy retail environment. The problem is you have too much capacity, and you're not going to solve that problem, your break even, by selling more vehicles anymore. I think that the cost side has to be attacked finally. And it's difficult to do that, right? You understand that, Jim, and that once you take capacity out and reduce headcount, it's twice as expensive to bring any of it back. So automakers have been slow to rationalize their structure. Dealerships have, attrition, and, the dealer base is actually rationalized a little bit more effectively, so that when I think about throughput, sales per dealership, per franchise, is actually reasonably healthy, historically speaking. It's certainly not what it was in the peak, but it's way, way better than it was in the worst of times in 2008, 2009. So where the franchise dealer base has actually consolidated effectively, the manufacturing footprint has not. And I think that's what we're up against next in 2025.
Right. And that's why we have you, Kevin Tynan, to help us navigate this in 2025. So Kevin Tynan, Director of Research for the Presidio Group, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It is always great catching up. Congratulations on your new position with Presidio Group. I think Bloomberg Intelligence, they'll probably close up shop now without you, and just say, forget it, that's it. We
They
miss him
couldn't
too
wait
much.
to see me go.
We'll leave
Thanks,
it.
Jim.
We'll leave it to CNBC. All right, man. Thanks so much.
Take care, Jim.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.